It's the one we wanted. Jannik Sinner versus Carlos Alcaraz for the Rome Masters final. It's here. Cannot wait to get into this one. Before we do get into it though, remember to hit that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Before the tournament started, Carlos Alcaraz said, "It's great to have Sinner back, and I'm hoping to meet him in the final." Now, when he said that, a lot of people were thinking the same thing. Would be great to see them in the final. But, of course, there's a long way to go. And he must have seen the future because it's here and he's ready. Jannik's ready. This should be an absolute blockbuster. I think a lot of people, including myself, would have expected Jannik to have made some sort of run, but I didn't expect him to make the final and potentially win it because he's been out for 3 months. Now, I get 3 months is not an incredibly long amount of time, but 3 months without any matches, I think is quite substantial. So it's been really impressive to see the way that he's handled this fortnight. And for Alcaraz as well, he's looked pretty good. There's a couple of, maybe not injury concerns, but niggles to talk about, but we're going to touch upon the head-to-head. We'll touch upon the route to the final. And then I think tactically, I'll try and break it down. There's not going to be too much between them, if I'm being honest, but on clay, we have seen them play on clay before. The head-to-head is actually 6-4 in favour of Carlos, and in terms of outdoor clay specifically, Carlos beat Jannik last year, of course, in that 5-set at Roland Garros, which wasn't a blockbuster in terms of quality, but in terms of drama, it was definitely a very watchable spectacle. And then in Umag, which was quite a few years back now in the final in 2022, Jannik got the better of Carlos, beating him in 3 sets there. So, the most recent one was also a win for Carlos in Beijing. And last year, Jannik had a phenomenal year. I think it's fair to say the best year on tour. But Carlos still managed to beat him all 3 times they played last year. So Jannik will be hungry to get the W, especially with the home crowd on his side, you would imagine. I know there's going to be a lot of fans for Alcaraz, but surely it being in Italy and Rome, he's going to have the crowd on his side. Let's see. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch as well. But yeah, in terms of quality, I mean, I don't think we could have got a better final, if I'm being honest. I think this should be the highest quality final that we could have gotten. I mean, if you think of the other players, and I mean, I just don't think it would have matched up. So in terms of Alcaraz's run, Lajovic, Djere, Khachanov, Draper and Musetti. Only the 1 set dropped against Khachanov. Khachanov's a tricky customer. I think very underrated player. He really is. But yeah, great wins, especially over Draper and Musetti, who are playing really well on the red dirt as well. 2 close straight set victories. And especially against Musetti with the crowd as well, I think he definitely played it well. He's got the nasal strip on. I don't know if he's feeling a little bit under the weather or whether he's just trying something out, but seems to be working. It's opened up his airways, and he's even quicker than before. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's clearly helping him in some aspect. He does also have a leg sleeve on, and that is slightly worrying. And I'm seeing a lot of players on tour, not just on the men's, but also on the women's tour, wearing these protective sleeves. And I almost think, I get the calendar so long, they don't want to drop points, etc. But maybe resting is the best way forward. Now, I don't know if it's just a preventative measure from Alcaraz, but something to just keep an eye on, especially with Roland Garros coming up and then Wimbledon, etc. as well. Doesn't want to make it worse that he's not... He doesn't want to make it worse so that he misses the 2 biggest tournaments probably on his calendar, Roland Garros and Wimbledon, given he's a champion, defending champion in both. For Sinner, he had an issue with blisters in the last match against Tommy Paul, and that was an interesting match, and we'll touch upon that in a second, but beat Navone, De Jong and Cerundolo all in straight sets. Then he put on a 9.62 out of 10 display, according to Tennis Insights, when he dropped only a single game against 2-time Roland Garros finalist and current Madrid Masters champion Casper Ruud. 6-love, 6-1, an absolute obliteration, to say the least. Just ridiculous tennis on display from Sinner. And then against Tommy Paul, that was an interesting one because he lost the first set at 6-1. Tommy Paul was redlining. I think Jannik was very surprised to see that level from the American, and then he managed to adjust, bageled Tommy Paul in the second set. So crazy match after the first two sets, and then 6-3 in the third set. Paul had his chances. That third set was tight, and Sinner managed to get over the line, I think a bit more clinical in the big moments, which is why he is now in the final and has given us the final that everyone wanted. In terms of how it might play out tactically and how both players looked, I think for Sinner coming back, there's been question marks around, how's he moving? I think he's moving almost, if not as good as he has in the past. I think you have to remember that they're playing on clay. It's a slower surface. He's not going to move. He definitely, in my opinion, moves better on a hard court and a grass court anyway. Whereas with Alcaraz, I think Alcaraz, his movement just seems to translate onto all surfaces. I feel like he moves the same. Maybe in the comment section you guys can disagree with me, but I feel like he moves the same on all surfaces, Alcaraz. And for Jannik, he still moves extremely well on clay. And in fact, if you watch the Tommy Paul match, there were some incredible sliding backhands as well. It probably just took him some time to get to grips with it. Not just the surface, because he's played on clay a lot in his career and in his life, but mainly the movement against elite players and having to really push himself to his limits at times. And I think he's now got to a stage over this fortnight where he is where he'd want to be. What's been interesting to me is actually the ball striking from Jannik. A very tennis nerdy thing to talk about, but a very, very nerdy thing to talk about is his backhand technique. So in the past, he used to have a high take back, and then he changed it to a low take back. Now it is neither high nor low. It is neutral, I guess you could say. And that seems to be a change that's been made in the off-season, in his 3-month suspension or ban. It looks really natural. I think when he changed his take back from the high to low, the low take back clearly worked. He won 2 Grand Slams with it. It was really effective. But at times it did look a bit clunky to me. It looked like he was almost bludgeoning the ball rather than it being just more natural, I guess graceful type shot. Look, grace is not what he's going for. He wants to play the most efficient way possible, like a Novak. But I just think it does seem to be working for him from what I've seen in Rome, like this new take back and this slightly tweaked technique on the backhand side. I think it's just given him, in my opinion, a better range in terms of going cross court and down the line. I think he is hitting the ball a lot sweeter, if that's even possible, because he's arguably the best ball striker on tour. But I think on the forehand and backhand side, he just looks a lot more loose. Looks a lot more confident, I think. And I've seen less conservative, tentative tennis from him in Rome. And that could be why he also got breadsticked in that first against Tommy Paul. He's probably going for a little bit more than he was last year, but not so much that he's gone into the territory where he's making so many errors like he did a few years back. So I think actually he's playing some really good tennis. I actually would argue it's even more attractive tennis than he has in the past. And the forehand on the line is a hammer like it always has been. But we're seeing less, I think, play down the middle. And he's really utilizing angles more. It just looks to me as if everything looks just super efficient and in a really attractive way, if that makes sense. And it's hard to describe what I mean, but maybe if you watch highlights of him from last year and compare it to this year at Rome specifically, or even if you watch the Australian Open highlights and compare it to him at Rome, there's a difference. There's definitely a difference. I think on the eye, it's better. Whether it produces better results remains to be seen, but that's just my opinion on it. For Carlos, he's looked good. I think the level has not been as high as Sinner's, and that is backed up by stats. The Tennis Insights scores on serve, return, forehand and backhand. Sinner tops when I say tops, he is in front of Alcaraz in all those metrics. But what you have to factor in is the fact that Alcaraz, on the big stage, against the players like a Sinner or a Djokovic, he always raises his level because these are the matches that he relishes. These are the matches that he wants to really be a part of. In terms of tactically, I mean, look, I think there's not really much between these two. And I talk about tactically how these matches can play out a lot. I think, to me, Carlos, in the last 3 matches last year, just in terms of physicality, he was a notch above Jannik. He played better in the clinical points. I think he was braver as well in those big points. And he managed to protect his ad corner, which in the past he's had issues with Jannik, but I think protected it really well. He's shored up his backhand defense. Also, his backhand slice has been more effective as well from Carlos, and the variety has definitely disrupted Sinner at times. For Sinner, I think, he plays a certain way, and there's not as many options for him as Carlos. That's just simple. That's just how it is at the moment. But what he does extremely well. And there's not many matches that he plays below an 8 out of 10. For Carlos, we can see the fluctuation. But against Jannik, he doesn't tend to dip that much form-wise. So I actually think Jannik's going to have to be really, really brave, I think, in this final. Because if he's not, I think Carlos will win. I think it's on clay. I think the surface suits Carlos more in this matchup. The slow clay courts, I think Carlos has obviously not been out for 3 months like Jannik has. And I think at the start, there might be a bit of adjusting because Tommy Paul is a very good player, but Carlos is a level above. And Jannik hasn't played anyone of Carlos's caliber since obviously coming back. This is his first tournament back. So I think the first set will be interesting to see how it transpires. I can see Carlos taking it and maybe Jannik gets a feel into it. I think Carlos will win it though in 3 sets. That's my gut feeling. I just think that, I mean, it would be ridiculous if he comes back after 3 months and then, beats everyone, including Carlos, to win Rome. There'd be a real statement going into Roland Garros, that's for sure. But I just think the surface, the conditions, the matchup from last year, I think Carlos will get it done. I think Jannik will be extremely hungry to get and start clawing back that head-to-head. But, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything from Carlos in this fortnight to make me worry that he's going to really struggle at Roland Garros or struggle in this Sinner matchup. And I think his level hasn't been where it needs to be a Sinner. But with him, what tends to happen is when he does play a Sinner, he goes up a notch or 2. So I think he'll get the W. Let me know in the comment section below what you think and why. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe for a while. I'll see you in the next video.